Everybody, happy Friday. Welcome into Soccer Morning here on Backheel.com. We are live, as always. We are back on YouTube. I am thrilled to have my visage back on the world's most watched video site. There aren't that many of you who watch via YouTube, but those of you who do, thank you very much. You get to see me. You see my lovely backdrop. Yeah, I know. Trevor making fun of me already in the comments. It tells you that it's a Friday. We're already getting started here on a Friday. Big show for you today. Our friend Charles Boehm from MLSsoccer.com, SoccerWire.com, USSoccerPlayers.com will join us in about 10 minutes. We're going to go over, we might preview USA Panama, but there are some other MLS issues that deserve some discussion as well, including Charlie's report that he's spoken to people who say a deal is very far off in the CBA negotiations, and the MLS players have been told to be prepared to strike. And we'll see how that goes with Charlie. At the bottom of the hour, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch will join us. We'll talk about the Columbus Crew offseason, and as they prepare for the season to start in 30 days, presuming it does start in 30 days, exactly how do the Crew manage to keep up with their Eastern Conference rivals? Now, the Crew was a very good team in 2014, made the playoffs, did some nice things, ultimately fell to the New England Revolution in the playoffs. Can they get back to that level and perhaps exceed that level in 2015? All right, let's do the headlines. Let's get you started on your Friday morning as you look ahead to the weekend. A bunch of games coming up this weekend, but in games that have already happened, Ghana beat Equatorial Guinea 3-0 yesterday in the African Cup of Nations semifinals to advance to the final match against Ivory Coast. That tournament is in Equatorial Guinea. Remember, Equatorial Guinea hosting the tournament because Morocco pulled out over fears of Ebola spreading. Equatorial Guinea had been eliminated from the tournament once already, got back in because of them being the new hosts, made it all the way to this stage, the semifinals, did it with a little bit of controversy in that win over Tunisia, and some controversy last night as well, or yesterday for us here in the American time zones. Some crowd trouble at this match. The fans of Equatorial Guinea, obviously none too pleased with some of the decisions that were going against their side, losing 3-0 in that game, started throwing things on the field, starting throwing things at the Ghanaian fans, at the Ghanaian players, and ultimately police had to escort Ghanaian fans out of the stadium in order to maintain order. There were reports all over Twitter from people on the scene that Equatorial Guinea fans were waiting for Ghanaian fans to rumble, I suppose. I mean, this is ugly, ugly stuff. I saw this morning Equatorial Guinea hit with a £65,000 fine. That's it. I mean, I don't know how much they have. I'm guessing they don't have a lot of money in that federation, but £65,000 doesn't sound like a whole lot. There's also other sanctions that could come down from as a result of this tournament. I mentioned that game against Tunisia that Equatorial Guinea won, to the Tunisians having accosted the referee, being very upset, having declared that the tournament was corrupt, were required to issue a retraction or face sanctions from the CAF. They have, I don't know where that stands. We'll get a check on that. So this is it's been a very tumultuous tournament. You would imagine so, considering that the tournament had to be moved out of Morocco in light of those Ebola fears to Equatorial Guinea. In France, Zlatan Ibrahimovic has declared that his PSG teammates will not speak to the press. This happened after a 1-0 win over Lille in Ligue 1. There are pictures of Zlatan walking his teammates through the mix zone after the match, saying, "Do not speak to the press, do not follow me, nobody talk," declaring himself the boss. Now, this is fantastic stuff for me. I love when Zlatan is Zlatan. That's bad for the press, and ultimately is bad behavior on the part of Ibrahimovic. But come on. It's just fun to see him pull one of these things. And producer Trevor before the show said, I can't wait for him to come to MLS. Please, Zlatan, come to MLS. Think about MLS. Think about the way that we cover MLS. Think about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Imagine Zlatan Ibrahimovic in an open locker room. Anybody? Can anybody imagine what that might be like? Zlatan gets out of the shower. He hits his locker. He's getting dressed, slowly putting on his $3,000 suit, and the press corps. they bum rush Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Can you even picture that? I want this to happen so badly, just to see him stare down a couple of reporters, watch them shrink like violets. Not that I want some of the guys I know who do a very good job covering this sport in a country where we need as much coverage as possible to be stared down and ashamed by or shamed by Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but it would be fun to watch. We also have a big weekend of matches coming up, as I mentioned at the top of the show. You've got Ronaldo returning for the Madrid derby between Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. Big match there. Those two teams separated by 7 points in the standings. Real on top, Atleti in third. It could be a big match for Atletico Madrid, provided they can beat Real, who will miss James Rodriguez. We mentioned his injury yesterday. Ronaldo coming back as a boost to Real Madrid in light of that situation. And speaking of injuries, I'm not sure what the situation is with Alexis Sanchez. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? I've seen different reports in two different places, basically using the same quotes from Arsene Wenger, characterizing it as he might play or he won't play. Arsene Wenger seems to think it's unlikely that Alexis Sanchez will play in the North London derby against Spurs this weekend. Meanwhile, Alexis Sanchez says he wants to play. We'll see if he's managed to convince Arsene Wenger he's ready to at least make the squad, the 18-man squad, for that game. He would normally start, obviously. I don't think he's quite there yet, but we'll see. He's carrying a hamstring injury. You also have the Merseyside derby. This is an interesting match, if only because the fortunes of the two teams in 2014, 2015, very different than they were last season. Roberto Martinez squeezed a lot out of Everton in the last campaign. Liverpool obviously came in second. Both teams have taken big steps back, although Liverpool is on good form at the moment. Meanwhile, Roberto Martinez probably just wants to get 3 points out of any match. It'll be difficult to do so against their inter-town rivals. The Cameroon FA, this is very interesting, and maybe we'll bring this up with Charlie Boehm in a couple minutes. The Cameroon FA has declared null and void the contract of Ambroise Oyango, the young fullback, traded to the Montreal Impact from the New York Red Bulls. This seems to stem from the fact that he was traded without his approval and the dislike of some parties in Cameroon and perhaps his agent as well with the way that MLS operates. Now, I don't know the nitty-gritty here. I do know that the technicality seems to be based on the fact that Ambroise Oyango was an amateur player when he was loaned to the Red Bulls. At least that's what the Cameroonian FA is saying. So we need to dig into this. I don't know it'll get to that point, but I'd be interested to know how MLS addresses Montreal's situation should Oyango not play for them, in light of the fact that the Red Bulls got the top allocation spot, which they used to sign Sasha Kljestan and Felipe Martins out of this deal. It'd be very interesting. Big weekend in international soccer for the United States. Both the men and the women play on Sunday. The U.S. women will be in France, which is a challenging match. We discussed this a couple weeks ago with Jeff Kassouf on this show. No easy task. Obviously, Hope Solo is suspended. There's going to be a lot of focus on the goalkeeper position for the U.S. women. And the U.S. men hosting Panama at the StubHub Center in Carson. We have the fallout from Jurgen Klinsmann's fitness comments. How will he use his team in this game? Will he throw out that 3-5-2 again? Lots of things to consider. So let's use that as a nice bridge to Charlie Boehm. We'll talk about USA Panama. We'll talk about some of these MLS governance issues. Fascinating week to talk to Charlie. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, Backheel.com.
2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on Backheel.com with Jason Davis.
Here we go. Let's talk some American soccer with our friend Charles Boehm from MLSsoccer.com and SoccerWire.com and USSoccerPlayers.com. Charlie, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Jason. Doing well on a Friday morning.
Are you staying warm? Because I'm cold.
It's really unpleasant.
It's
again for the millionth time. I don't know how you Canadians do it out there. I have so much respect for y'all. This like normal, 10 degrees, 15 degrees, normal for those folks. You know, Buffalo, Minnesota.
Yeah.
I have huge respect for you guys. I can't do it. I'm on the verge of suicidal thoughts here.
Yeah,
but I'm hanging in.
It's
It's over soon.
It's a little cold. We stay indoors at this time of year, but we are preparing for an MLS season. I'm gonna get to some MLS topics in a minute, Charlie. Specifically about a tweet you had the other day. But USA Panama on the weekend, and I would be remiss if I didn't preview that a little bit. Even though I'm sort of over this game as providing anything real for us, especially in light of the comments that Jurgen Klinsmann made this week about player fitness. How are you viewing what the U.S. needs to do against Panama on Sunday? Look, they beat Panama all the time. I think the one victory Panama had was in a Gold Cup, 2013 or 2011.
2011.
2011. Yeah, I have to go back to 2011 under Bob Bradley. So what do they need to do in this game?
Well, nothing fixes your problems like winning, right? I mean, that's the easiest thing to do here is play well. Blow the Panamanians off the field with quality play and with some goals and maybe post a clean sheet. That's the simple way to do things. That said, I think there's other ways to go about it. I think a lot of fans at this point are aware that it's an experimental period. They're aware that we're trying out new formations here. We're trying out new players and new combinations. But show something, show some quality. You know, things looked decent for a little while there in that Chile match last week. But then that late fade, which is a trend that far predates this whole fitness gate or fitness Ghazi or whatever we want to call it, right? This team has been fading down the stretch for 7 months, 8 months. Yeah. Maybe you could even peg it back further to the World Cup. What I'm looking for on Sunday is some coherence, some passing combinations, some of that proactive play that Clinton's been promising us for the last 42 months. And I want to emphasize that this coach has been in charge of this program for 42 months.
It's interesting to consider, and I'll get to some individual players maybe and what to look for in that regard in a second, but it's interesting to consider whether or not Klinsmann has burned some of his remaining credit with the fans in light of the fitness comments. If he hadn't said those things and he experimented on Sunday and they don't look, again, you're expected to beat Panama and a loss would have been, very distressing. But if they didn't play well and got a draw or something, or didn't play well and won 1-0, I think it would be okay. But with him continuing to criticize players, not by name in this case, but just in general, don't you feel like he's maybe at least with the fans shortened his leash a bit?
Yeah, I think fans have a innate sort of BS detector, and there's a certain way of comportment that they expect from a coach, and this is fans around the world. When a coach's team loses, there's a number of ways you can respond to that. But we're seeing this trend of Klinsmann pointing the finger at his players. And I have to go back and look through, but if I remember correctly, I want to compile this information. This is something he's done after many losses. Specifically, it happened after that Honduras match, that ugly loss that opened the hexagonal way back when in 2013. He's done it on a couple of occasions since. There's a tendency here that seems like a pattern, and even if the players have made mistakes, at some point it's a bad look for a coach to continue to point the finger that way. Even if it is on your players, take some of that burden on yourself. When we look at masterful managers around the world, you see that most of what they're doing in public is working to take the pressure off their players. Even if they're piling that pressure on the players in private, in training sessions, even if they're unsatisfied with what they're getting from the squad, there's a real finite limit to the response you get from public criticism. Some players, they can't take it at all. Some players can take it in small doses, and there's a precious few players that really thrive off of it. But I think at this point, Jurgen's got to try something different. You've got to find a way to make this a we thing rather than a me and you thing, because you notice he's been slow to use the first person plural here, and people notice that, especially players. I found that players are keenly aware of how their coach handles them and speaks to them both in public and in private. If you're using the me and you thing, that gets old quickly.
In terms of, again, moving past Klinsmann, and obviously so much of what they do stems from him and his direction, we saw the 3-5-2 for a half against Chile. Would you expect to see that again? Any tweaks you would expect, especially in light of Jermaine Jones talking about his struggles to adapt?
I certainly hope we see it again, because if you're going to try something significantly different from your previous status quo, is that you can't try and really make a meaningful judgment from 45 minutes or 60 minutes, in one match. You've got to give your players time. I mean, there's fundamental differences in the spacing, in the roles, in the communication, in a 3-man backline versus the 4-man backline that the team had been playing in. So if you are serious about trying that, and if you think of all the hours they've invested on the training ground in that system, you've got to give it more of a run out. I'm a little surprised he switched things up as quickly as he did in Chile, but there's some, it's understandable to some extent. Now, it's time to see what a different opponent, how it works on a different opponent, how it works in a different setting. I think there's a lot of potential. We see the wide play that it enables. We see some of the things that it created in a positive way against Chile. So let's see it in a couple different settings. If he abandons it so quickly, I think that's going to say some untoward things about his mentality as a coach and his the thought process, because I don't understand why you would do that. Now, that said, I do think you want to try, at least for part of the time, you want to try a different person in the center of that 3-man back line. The Jermaine Jones experiment is a fascinating one. It may yet pay off, but right now it's time to see who your other options are there. Maybe Matt Beasler has the IQ and the leadership and the communication skills to do that role. Maybe there's someone else on the current squad that can do it. But let's see, and let's see that kind of experimentation with the personnel rather than just changing the same guys into different spots or into different formations.
Beyond Matt, talking about the wingbacks in this system, obviously key. What are you looking for there?
I want to see some more out and out wing play. I think you saw the promising potential that comes from the 3-5-2 and the width that it brings with Shea and Yedlin. Miguel Ibarra, we've heard Clemson say a lot of nice things about the NASL kid. He's brought him in for several camps now. We'll give him a run out. Let's get him in the starting 11. Let's see what he can do. If you are truly approaching this month or this camp with an experimental spirit, let's give Miguel Ibarra, 60 minutes or maybe a full 90 minutes. And then, as you mentioned, the center back spot, there's a couple of intriguing options that you could try there. I think Beasler is a great option there. Maybe even Matt Hedges, slot him in there. So, once again, experimentation should apply, all the way across the board, in my opinion, at this stage.
Let's move on. I mean, again, it's a national team game. It'll grab some attention, but it ultimately is a friendly with some experimental elements, and Klinsmann, we'll see how he does. Let's move on to some MLS topics. Part of the reason, I'll connect them here, for these MLS players not to be as fit as maybe Jurgen Klinsmann wants them is because it is the offseason. They came into camp after a break. Now, Klinsmann has talked about extending the season, but we would need to start the season in 2015 first. You had a tweet the other day that indicated that these two sides are still very far apart. Now, there is a month, and we know sometimes these things come down the wire. But from what you understand, the players are in fact gearing up, or at least in terms of rhetoric, gearing up for a strike.
Yeah, I think that we're a month out now, and there's a lot of players in this league who are effectively living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm not, I've been told by some knowledgeable folks that the players have been told by their leadership to prepare for a strike. Now, that could mean any number of things. My opinion, what that means is that they've got a month now to start stocking away some money. They've got a month to try and get their finances in as good an order as they possibly can to prepare for not getting paid for a while. So it's a little alarming, but it can't say it's a big surprise given the tone of negotiations thus far. The other interesting news that just dropped yesterday was that it appears that they do have a mediator in the negotiations now in DC at this stage. So also a sort of a reminder of just how tough things have gone at the table thus far. But it's also encouraging to see that they've brought in an outside evaluator, someone who can help them close that distance a bit. But it's tough at this stage to see how they're gonna find common ground on some of these fundamental issues, as the biggest of which is free agency.
Well, obviously, if the players are going to get what they want, or they're going to make a hard stand, there's going to have to be some significant sacrifice in a large portion of the player base. Now, my first question is to you as to whether or not you know of any pooling of money, any shared responsibility in terms of carrying players over that maybe don't make as much during a strike period.
Yeah, I think they have a rainy day fund. The union is a very small organization, though, and not generally very leaky. So I don't know too many details about the rainy day fund, but rest assured, the players have known for a while that this is a really knockdown, drag out negotiation period. They knew that free agency was going to be a priority for them. So my hope is that they prepared for that from some time out. And one thing you can say about the skyrocketing designated player salaries is that if you apply, generally how unions do this across the board is you apply a percentage of your salary to the rainy day fund. So the $6 million men, the big earners are going to be chipping in a bigger chunk, and hopefully they're also going to be contributing with leadership and support, public support. We saw this week Robbie Keane took care to stress his support and his unity with the cause in a Sports Illustrated piece with Brian Strauss. I think we may see a little bit more of that. Michael Bradley's been a very vocal supporter of the union's approach. So that's a crucial element here. Keeping everybody on side, keeping everybody on the same page.
Just to clarify, you mentioned the mediator and that news breaking or coming out yesterday. Now, according to what Twitter is telling me right now, just the only place where that's being reported is down in Orlando through a TV station story. So I'm not positive, and some people are saying that maybe that hasn't happened yet. You would imagine that a mediator may come into play at some point, and it definitely did in 2010. So even if that hasn't happened, I suppose we should expect that. Maybe they haven't reached that stage. In terms of the go ahead.
My messages just blew up as well, and I'm getting told that that's incorrect. So I'll trust the smart folks who've reached out to me in the last minute or so here. Maybe they're not. If they're not at that point yet, which sounds like they're not. That's not a good sign.
All right, Jonathan Tannenwald on Twitter was told this morning by MLS Players Union, both sides in MLS CBA talks are open to having a mediator, but there is not one officially involved yet. So that's the report from Jonathan Tannenwald up in Philadelphia. In terms of the messaging across the board from these players, Robbie Keane saying that he backs the notion of a strike should it come to that. How important is it for those top level players, the Bradleys, the Altidores, the Keanes, who are making the most money, to be saying these things publicly?
Oh, I think it's crucial. These are the guys who benefited the most from the status quo. They're the ones who have gained the most from the league's approach to date financially and in terms of the structure of contracts and the structure of the league. So, if they're willing to go to bat for the guys making $36K, $40K, $50K, who are living a fundamentally different lifestyle, then in a sense, it's really just the minimum. It's a must-have for the union. But the fact that they've already gotten that in line is a good sign for them. But the question is, if worst-case scenario unfolds and it's kind of a strike action or a lockout, and things drag on, and more than just a few weeks or days of the season is postponed or put off, then in that we get into a month or multiple months of a strike action or some kind of labor dispute. That's when life really starts to get hard for these players, making modest salaries, with mouths to feed, with bills to pay. So that's where we'll sort of see if, and I hope, and I'm sure everyone around the league on both sides of this issue hopes that it doesn't get to that point. But that's when the support and the leadership of those big earners is really going to count for the most.
Yeah, and I wonder if we might see some sort of grassroots movement, particularly in the cities with the most ardent fan bases, where they pass around a hat for some of the lower earners in the league, especially if they back the players on the notion of free agency. And I certainly get the sense that the MLS fan base is more behind the players than the owners. And that's, look, big money tends to alienate some people, and that's certainly what the owners have. All right, before I let you go, Charlie, I'm running out of time, but there are a couple of things in the way that MLS operates that have come up in recent weeks that are interesting. And I'm going to start with training compensation. I'm about to talk to Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch in a couple minutes. And this came up specifically because of Sergio Campbell, a draft pick out of Jamaica, and the notion that MLS does not pay training compensation. Now, his team down in Jamaica, Portmore United, I believe, asked for $7,500. They've come to some agreement. I don't know what it is. MLS won't disclose it. But in general, what's the issue for MLS when it comes to training compensation?
Well, it's a revenue, or it's a cost stream that they just don't want to deal with. I think that's the simplest way to put it. They're comfortable not paying training compensation. They're comfortable not receiving training compensation when they sell players abroad. We know this league is extremely cost conscious, and they're accustomed to relying on the draft system as the sort of the easiest and most cost effective way to bring in talent. And that's obviously come predominantly from the NCAA ranks. But the last decade or so has seen a real explosion in the internationalization of the NCAA scene. So you're getting kids from all over the world that are coming here, and many of them are elite players who are then able to rise to the next level and go into the MLS draft. And in this case, it's brave, and I'm impressed with Portmore for stepping up and for laying down a hard line. They had a role in Campbell's development, and they're appealing to FIFA regulations. This is something that a domestic American player wouldn't be dealing with, because U.S. Soccer has effectively received and enforced an exemption from FIFA. They don't have to pay training compensation, and it's to me, you're limiting yourself on both sides. You're limiting your costs. You're also limiting your return on your investment. If MLS and U.S. Soccer in general is serious about reaching the next level of player development, you're going to have to open this Pandora's box and get into this and give a little here and there and to get a lot more. Because as it is now, the American player development system, as messy and chaotic as it is growing a lot of strong players. Yeah. And if they leave your academy, many of them we're seeing already. Some of the top youth internationals right now are going over to Europe, and the club that helps in their development, the clubs, plural, are getting nothing. Yeah. And so long term, that's got to change.
And you would imagine, and just to make a point on this, you would imagine that this would mitigate some of that win first mentality at some of these youth clubs in the U.S. if they're able to drive some revenue from the kids that they develop properly. I mean, it's so much about winning and then getting kids in whose parents are paying large amounts of money to fund the club, and coaches who know that if they don't win, they're not going to convince the parents to pay. That if you had this revenue stream, would that make a difference, Charlie?
I think it would. It's just that it requires a fundamental shift in philosophy and perspective, which is what is our raison d'etre? What is our justification for existence? What is our metric for success? And too many clubs, even MLS clubs, are still relying on old metrics of success. National Signing Day was this week. Wednesday was the opening of the official period in which NCAA recruits can sign letters of commitment. And plenty of MLS clubs we're celebrating their product, signing college commitments. which is great. I think national academies are supposed to be operating a significantly different mentality from the previous, status quo youth clubs. But it's hard to do that, right? Like growing pros is really hard. We know how to grow college players. We don't necessarily have that institutional expertise on growing elite level pros. So I think that's something where we've got to get up to the next level. That's where the climb into the international elite is tough. See it in the devilish details like that.
So MLS doesn't pay training compensation. You're saying that the Pandora's box has got to be opened at some point. It's a little bit of MLS putting their fingers in their ears and going la 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 la. Another thing that causes consternation, especially for foreign players who come here, is the way MLS does player trades. I mean, this is standard in American sports, but it's foreign to the rest of the world. And we've got an issue with Ambroise Oyongo, the young fullback who was traded from the New York Red Bulls to Montreal in order for the Red Bulls to be able to sign Sasha Kljestan and get Felipe Martins in. I don't know if you know a lot about this, Charlie, but apparently the Cameroon FA is unhappy, the agent's unhappy, and they're claiming that he's a free agent, I guess based on some technicality in terms of how his loan went down with the Red Bulls.
Yeah, I don't know the details on this. It's an interesting situation here, and we've seen some hijinks for coming out of Cameroon in the past. There was another young Cameroonian player was a target for the Colorado Rapids, Charles Boehm. I think this was the beginning of last year, maybe even all the way back to 2013. But the Cameroon FA, seemingly in cahoots with his club, played games with his registration and kept him from joining the club that the Rapids that thought they had him signed up, well before the season started. So. Again, this is one of the reasons that we see MLS stick so rigidly to their single entity approach. They would rather deal with these issues as a collective. The league headquarters feels that they're much more empowered and they have much better leverage in dealing with this murky international transfer market collectively than as individual clubs. In Oyongo's case, I think that MLS can end up winning here because the single entity model has been blessed and has been approved by FIFA repeatedly over the years. I don't think that he's got a lot of leverage. I think we're effectively seeing a player who's unhappy with having to change destination, and why not? I don't blame him. I think it's baffling for me that a team like the Red Bulls would pursue a guy like that for so long, both jump through all the hurdles it takes to go get a player like him on the international market, and then swap them out. But that's another consequence of a change of ownership or a change of leadership. Mm-hmm. A new coach, new GM, putting their stamp on things. So he has a right to be upset. But I think that when it comes to the legalese here, he's got to have a really, really good case. It must be a really compelling wrinkle in the paperwork somewhere. But I honestly don't see it happening.
Yeah.
We may see another situation like we did last year, where maybe there's a negotiated exit of some kind, but I don't know that he's going to be able to dictate the terms of where he goes within MLS. Mm-hmm. But maybe that he's disgruntled enough that he can force a move abroad.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a new country involved. There's a language barrier certainly in Montreal. I don't know if Oyongo speaks any French, but there you go. So there are some things, and
he certainly should.
Well, he certainly
Cameroonian, but,
sure, but
this is reminiscent of the Camilo situation last year, where the relationship broke down. The player thought he had an out to go chase a big Mexican payday without transfer pay having to be paid. There's all too many folks out there that the world of agents is intensely complex and often very manipulative. There may be a third party or fourth parties here who have suggested that they can remove the player from their current situation and provide them a way out to more money or a choice of destination. But that's a tough road to hoe.
I apologize for the gap in my African colonization knowledge there when it comes to Cameroon and French. But we'll move on. I got to run. Charlie Boehm, MLSsoccer.com, US Soccer Players, SoccerWire.com. Thank you very much for your time, Charlie. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Have a great show.
Let's take a break. When we come back, Adam Jardy, Columbus Dispatch. We'll talk Columbus Crew off season. Maybe bring up Sergio Campbell. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, Backheel.com.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on Backheel.com with Jason Davis.
Here we go. Let's talk a little Columbus Crew with Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch on the line with me now. Adam, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Jason. How about yourself?
I'm good. It's not that the Columbus Crew haven't done some things in the offseason to this point to get ready for 2015. But at the same time, I wonder if you have a little reporter envy when you look around the Eastern Conference and see that, the Revs have re-signed Agadello, and New York has brought in Sasha Kleshtin, and NYCFC is getting started with these big names. What do you make of the way that the Columbus Crew offseason has gone in relation to the rest of the Eastern Conference?
I will, maybe I'll admit to a little bit of envy, but I will say that I was able to maybe unwind a little bit more in the offseason than maybe some other MLS beat reporters. So
Sure.
I guess I'll kind of take that and, run with it a little bit.
Okay, fair enough.
It's interesting to me when you look at the Crew and its offseason, because really a significant portion of it began before last season ended. The biggest need that this team has had, I know we've talked about it, everybody's talked about it for the last 2-3 years. They need a striker. And they believe they found that striker in Kai Kamara. So they go out and they sign him late last season. He can't play last season, obviously, but that's basically their big off-season acquisition. And it's a guy that's been here since August, September, and spent the last month or two of the season training with the team, was here for off-season workouts and conditioning. So really, when I look at their off-season, that's the biggest impact player, and he was signed during last season. And then also, at the same token, Emmanuel Pogatetsa. There's a central defender that they signed late last year, was eligible to play and did get a couple of minutes, but they didn't want to mess with the chemistry they had going down the stretch, so he didn't see a whole lot of action. He'll start this year. He's one of the highest paid guys on the team. He's going to be a starter from day one. And so when you look at where they're going to get contributions from new guys next season, to me, it's two guys that they had signed before last season ended.
It's a good point. I think it seems so long ago that Kai Kamara joined. Obviously, but you said Pogatet's towards the end of the year. So those things are feeding into 2015, but with all this other news out there, we tend to forget about it. There are a couple of things. There are a couple of signings that they've made since then, and certainly in the transfer in the window right now. I don't know if you have a book on any of these guys. What do we know about Cedric, for example?
Well, the first thing that I know about Cedric is that he's young, he's fast, and he hasn't scored a goal in about 3 years, something like that. So, I look at them signing a guy like that, and you've got to think, okay, there's a lot of upside there. This is a guy that has trained his entire career in Spain, has played at, some very high levels over there, and you've got to like that sort of pedigree with a guy of that age. I don't know that, I think the fans, you hear a signing and you look at where he's from, and you expect him to come in and be a major force. I don't see it yet. And maybe I'll be telling you a different story if we're talking in August or September here, but that's a guy that I think, has a lot of upside, but he's I think 22 years old. He's younger than some of the guys they drafted. So, it tells you that I think he's a little bit of a ways off. I think he's a guy that can add competition and add some depth on the wings, but I don't see him making a major impact this year. So, I just don't.
So he's going to be, if he does get some time, if he is a factor, it would be on the wing. We already mentioned the big signing at striker with Kai Kamara coming back. You have Romain Gall in the team. He's obviously a US U20. What's the development path for a guy like Romain Gall?
Well, they're expecting him to play more this year. And we saw him a little bit last season, and they acquired him right toward the end of the transfer window. And, he saw a couple of minutes here and there. He looked sharp and just, some bit time down the stretch. But a guy that they think can come in and challenge for a lot more playing time this year. And I think that how much we see of Gall will kind of depend on how much he's willing to run with it. He's had a really good offseason. He's represented well with the U20s, and it's a guy that, they're going to be looking for guys to play on the wing. It's the position they substitute the most, especially late in games. That's where you see guys come on and give them a spark. And he's one of the many guys that's going to be trying to carve out a niche there, and he's going to have a chance to do it. So I'm really curious to see as this preseason goes on, where he is and what he starts to show them, because that's a guy that could have a big impact this year.
So again, we know what the Crew SC. I had to make that transition, don't I? When does it officially happen, or did it officially happen already?
I think it was like the first of the year was when they really kind of started to hammer on it. I know that in the last month or so, my stories have changed to reflect that. So on first reference, it is Crew SC and not the Crew, which has taken some time to get used to. So, I think the transformation is here.
You know, we're in the middle of the CBA negotiations. I just touched on some of that with Charlie Boehm, the likelihood of a strike, or the likelihood, certainly the almost certainty that we're going to have a federal mediator involved, just like the last time around. There's new ownership in Columbus. There's a new sort of invigorating feeling around the club. There's the new branding. There's, I don't know where the talk on the stadium is, but certainly some upgrades to Crew Stadium over the last couple of years, and maybe some more plans. How does Precourt view? Where do you think he falls in terms of the owners in MLS? We have this notion that there are some distinctive groups of either conservative or more proactive owners.
You know, that's an interesting question, and I haven't really had the opportunity to present that to him recently. I think that, you know, he sort of exemplifies, I feel like, sort of the new wave of owners, and I think he's a little bit more forward-thinking than maybe some of the owners in the league. I think that he's a guy that, this is just pure speculation on my part, but I don't think he would be upset with things like salary cap raising and, you know, being able to have a little bit more flexibility to sign players and to, you know, maybe go outside the box and change things a little bit. I don't think he's a guy that's going into any of those meetings and thumping his fist on the table and saying status quo. I think I would guess that he would recognize that the league needs to adapt a little bit and change a little bit. And I would see him being a little bit more progressive. And I think that, you know, maybe some of that too comes with, there is some momentum around his team right now. I mean, there's, with the rebranding, with the way they finished last season, you know, there's a little bit more excitement, I would say, than the last 3-4 years getting ready for the season. And I think that it would be very detrimental for them in this market to have a work stoppage. And I'm sure it's you know, probably the same just about everywhere, but sure. Specifically here, we're trying so hard to carve out a niche. It would really hurt them to not have the season start on time here.
Speaking of that niche, you know, what sense, I mean, while they put their team together, and it's obviously second year for Greg Berhalter at the helm, and Anthony Precourt, you know, with his stewardship now as owner, kind of taking on, you know, he really is, I hate to use this, he's owning the team more than he did before, clearly with the rebrand and like, what is the feeling in town about the Crew heading into this season? Is there a sense that there is a buzz? Are they going to sell more season tickets? Where do things stand on that front?
You know, I think they're hoping that they sell more season tickets. It's interesting. They've changed their focus a little bit from an organizational standpoint to where, yes, they want to grow their season ticket base, but they're trying really hard to just get more sellouts in just about any way that they can do it. So whether that's walk-up tickets, group sales, or season tickets, that's the main focus. And last year, that was highly touted as the season came to an end, that they had 5 or 6 sellouts last year, which was a Crew Stadium record. And so there's sort of a belief that if they can continue to sell out Crew Stadium, that will make more people understand what it is to experience a game there. It will increase the atmosphere. It will make people more excited to go there. You know, continue to build that buzz that they talk about all the time. And so that's really where the focus is now, is that they want to get as many people in the stadium as they can, whether that's season tickets or whether that's, you know, hopefully not comp tickets, but, you know, just getting butts in the seats. And so, you know, you obviously can't do that without a strong season ticket base. And I know that they're still working on that, but I think they're still sort of in that same realm where they've been for the last several years. I mean, they're probably somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 season tickets. And, yeah, I don't know what it's going to take for them to get through that, but there certainly is an excitement level for the year, though. I think more than the last, like I said, probably the last 3-4 years, is that, you know, last year's team really kind of caught people by surprise a little bit. I mean, myself absolutely included. I didn't expect them to finish third. I didn't expect them to close down the stretch the way that they did. And obviously the playoff exit left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But, you know, you look at why they were successful last year, and you look at what they have on the roster and where they've upgraded, and you say, well, there's no reason to expect that they shouldn't be any better. Yeah. I mean, expectations are there for them to at least maintain what they did last year.
You look at the roster, obviously coming off of a good season in 2014. They have talent. There's entertainment here. Obviously, we know what Federico Higuain brings to the table every time he steps on the field. But there are guys like Will Trapp and Ethan Finley. And before I get to a couple questions about those guys specifically, I'm looking here. Some of the other names brought in: Mohamed Syed from a Swedish player, Christian Steindorsen, an Icelandic player. Seems like Greg is maybe mining that Scandinavian connection. Not that Iceland is Scandinavia. I've gotten in trouble with that before. But you are, you're seeing some international flavor in the midfield. What do those guys bring, as far as you can tell, with camp underway?
Well, they add more depth, first off, and that's a very boring answer to the question, but it's true. I mean, Steindorsen's a guy that I think can compete for a starting role right off the bat. I think based on maybe what he brings and sort of his size and the way he likes to play the game. If he can grasp Greg's system off the bat, I feel like he's a guy that can make a case for a job. The problem is that I don't see how you displace a guy like Ethan Finlay. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I know you said we'll talk about him in a little bit, but the way he played last year, that's a guy that, he's a starter. He's proven it. You need to give him a chance. And so I think Steindorsen's on a list with a list of guys like Justin Meram and Roman Gall and maybe even Ben Spies and, a couple of other guys who are in the mix for that starting spot in the left wing. And so, I think that's a guy that when you look at off-season additions, I think that's the guy that can come in and make an immediate impact. As far as Said goes, I don't see him as a starter. I don't see him as a guy that will displace a Will Trapp. Now, I see him as maybe being a guy who holds down that spot when Will's on national team duty. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of these moves, when I look at them and I try to figure out how they all fit in, to me, I feel like they've upgraded the bottom end of the roster. These are guys that when you have to make a sub, when you have a guy away, suspension, injury, national team, whatever, these are guys that can step in, and the level is probably going to drop a little. It's not going to drop as drastically as last year. So I think, to me, that's where you see some of these guys making impacts, is helping that overall depth and helping build that bottom half of the roster.
Another guy who may be depth, and I think this would be a little distressing to some American national team fans who would like to see him continue to get playing time and maybe break in under Jurgen Klinsmann, is Chris Kloot. Acquiring Chris Kloot, is that a depth thing? I mean, it doesn't seem to me like he's likely to displace Waylon Francis as a starter.
No, I don't see him. I don't see that happening either. I could see him spelling Waylon if he's away on national team duty. I honestly could see him opening the season at right back. Okay. And they signed Hernan Grana out of Argentina a week or two ago, and that's a guy that's things are expected of him, and I think most fans probably project him to be the starter, but he's coming off a rough year. He didn't play very well last year. He didn't fit into the system where he was, and there's going to be some adjustments, and I think he might eventually be the long-term starter, but I don't know that, coming into a new league and a new team and coming off a tough season, I don't know that he immediately jumps in the lineup. I think maybe you go with a guy like Kloot who has the experience in the league and has played at a high level here, so that's kind of my expectation for Kloot. I think he maybe starts the season at right back, and then you see him, as a depth guy on either side.
Will Trapp, you mentioned him potentially being away on national team duty at points during this season, and clearly he's been on a trajectory that puts him in the mix to be one of Jurgen Klinsmann's choices at various times, depending on the type of roster. In terms of what Will Trapp means to this team, I mean, I just feel like we need to share a couple of words on how important he's become, how good he's become as a player for the Columbus Crew.
It's really hard to almost put it into words, because he doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. You might not see him on the highlight reel, but he does such a good job of remaining calm on the ball. He can handle pressure well. And he's so good at switching the point of attack. I mean, he's like that pendulum there in the back where, the ball needs to get 40 yards up the field on the other side, and he's able to make that pass. And he does it with a guy in his face or with a guy trying to close him down. He means so much. Also, I feel just from a leadership standpoint, from a youth standpoint, from a local standpoint. I mean, he grew up 15 minutes from the stadium, and I think that the fans, recognize that, and then they kind of rally behind the guy. He's a fiery guy. He has all those things that you look for, aside from being a really good soccer player. He has all the little qualities on and off the field that you want to see in a leader, and that's why. Last year Greg Berhalter made him a vice captain, and then he ended up, when Michael Parkhurst was away for a little while. Will Trapp became the youngest captain in MLS history last season. I mean that's the kind of player he is, and so that tells you where he's going, and I think it's going to be a really interesting year for him, because last year he really played himself onto the radar, and now he's got to continue to build off of that.
Ethan Finley is another guy with a little bit of chatter about a national team future, but it's not just the United States, it's also Canada. He has eligibility there, and specifically, I've got a Canadian listener who wants to know if you've heard anything specific about where Ethan might lean in his ultimate decision, because it's not going to be easy. It's a little Tesho Akindele. Do you, not that Ethan's had a call-up yet, but do you go and risk not playing much for the U.S., or do you go and help Canada, where you might be able to start pretty quickly?
Well, I can say that I know that both possibilities are intriguing to him, but I think that his top priority is the United States. He would really like to play for Jurgen. He'd really like to play in this system. He really wants to represent his country. Now, that being said, I think that if time goes on and that call doesn't come, then at some point you say, you know what, I want to go play for somebody. And if Canada, in fact, is making a call to him, it would be difficult for him to say no. I think that right now, if Canada called him, my impression is that he would say, not yet. I'm not ready to make that switch. Give me a little bit of time. If we're 6 months from now or a year from now and he duplicates what he did last year, this year, and the United States still isn't calling him, and Canada does, I think all bets are off at that point. Yeah. But my understanding is that his preference right now will be to play for the United States, but he wouldn't necessarily say no to Canada if they were to call.
Hey, look, he's 24 years old. I mean, he's one of those guys. It's not that he's not talented. It's just that because of the way that American development typically works, and especially with the college guys, by the time you really make an impact, you don't have much time left to make that decision. He can't wait until he's 27 before he decides.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And like you said, I mean, as far as like taking time to make that impact, I mean, he didn't score at all until last season. We broke out and had 11 goals. And so, it's all, you're kind of compressing all this development and all these big decisions into a very short time period for him. And I know that he's done a pretty good job of not being too overwhelmed by it and being able to sort of stay focused on the here and now. But it's a crazy time for Ethan Finley right now. And it's going to be a really interesting year to see what he's able to do.
Last question here for you, Adam, before I let you go. Again, the season is a month away, provided that we started on time with the CBA negotiations. But when you look at the Eastern Conference, and we talked a little bit about, it's not that the offseason has been quiet, it's just been a different type of offseason than some of these other teams in the East. Do you believe the Crew have lost ground to their competitors for the playoff spots, or do you think that they have managed to maintain, especially, and look, consistency and having your core come back, that's an advantage as well?
It's really hard to say, because I felt like last year with their acquisitions, I mean, bringing in Steve Clark and Michael Parkhurst and retaining a lot of the core that they had from the year before that, I felt like the Crew was better, but everybody around them got more better. That was how I felt going into last season, and then they end up finishing third. This year, I feel like the Crew, at the very least, kept pace with everybody. Because, like I said, I feel like adding Kamara, I feel like adding Pogatetz, I feel like, some of these guys that had breakout seasons last year, I think that they're in a good spot. And it's hard, especially now, I mean, with 6 teams making the playoffs, I mean, there's no reason to expect they won't at least reach postseason. Now, I don't know that they will finish third again. It's going to be really interesting to me to see how things work in Greg Berhalter's second season. Because I think I look at what Caleb Porter did his first year and how well they played, and then the struggles they went through that next year. And I wonder if we're going to see a similar sort of dip here in Columbus this season, because the blueprint is out. The word is out. People know how they're going to play. They know who most of these guys are. Can they adapt to it this year? Can they overcome the fact that teams know what they're going to do and still find a way to win? And what's interesting is, like you said, they haven't necessarily made as many of the big off-season acquisitions as other teams. So that might end up hurting them a little bit, because maybe there's not as much new to prepare for when you talk about the Crew as you talk about the other teams. So really, in a lot of ways, I don't want to pit in on one guy, but in a lot of ways, it really depends on what Kai Kamara can do.
Yeah,
I mean, if he come in and score, 10, 12 goals, maybe more, I mean, that would do wonders for them. But if he can't, then they're basically the same team they were last year, and I don't know that gets them as far as it did.
Yeah, we'll see if Columbus Crew fans, Crew SC fans, see a lot of heart-shaped hands this season with Kai Kamara. Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch, Adam Jardy on Twitter. Thanks for your time and your insight, Adam. I appreciate it.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for the call.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll open to the phone lines, get the Twitter machine fired up. It's a Friday. You're heading into the weekend. Give me your thoughts. Let's go. Soccer Morning, Backheel.com.
Gain the urge to run away, but hold her down with soggy clothes and breeze blocks. Shivers in your fever, scream me again. Never kisses, or do you ever send a full stop?
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on Backheel.com with Jason Davis.
Guys, you have no idea what I put up with around here. No idea. Just constant, I don't know. Criticism, constant, I don't know. It's just ridiculous. The working environment around here. Let me just, no, I'm serious. I'm not serious. Not serious at all. All right. Let's open up the phone line, 347-756-6276. Get the Twitter machine going. Right as I was getting done with Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch, Robert jumped on, wanted to know about the blackout situation in Columbus. I asked Adam off the air. No change, Robert. Unfortunately, there's not going to be any change at all when it comes to the TV situation for the Columbus Crew. If you remember from last season, the Crew signed a deal with Time Warner Cable, or Time Warner Sports, excuse me. That's there's limited distribution within the Columbus market for that channel. It's only available if you have Time Warner Cable. Not very many people do, and apparently there's not going to be any change, and you won't be able to see those games on MLS Live if you live locally. Sorry about that. Maybe we can create a underground network to get streams going for Columbus Crew fans. Vince, what's going on, man?
Oh, hey, Jason, how's it going?
It's going well. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk some Jurgen Klinsmann.
You do? All right. You want to give us your perspective on what did Charlie call it? He called it Fitnessgate or Fitness Gossip. I don't want to talk about it that way. What's up, Vince?
It's interesting because for the longest time I was a Klinsmann defender. I'd always jump to his defense whenever someone would criticize him. But since the World Cup, I've kind of changed my opinion on him, and now I'm at the point where I don't think he's the right guy for the job anymore. I'll just leave it at that because as a Canadian, for a long time, I was saying, if the U.S. doesn't want Klinsmann, I'd be more than happy to take him off their hands. Yeah. But now I'm not so sure. I mean, I still think Klinsmann's, he's not a job for life, but unless he, tanks spectacularly at the Gold Cup, he's not going to get fired. I think they're going to give him all the way until 2018 to see if, whatever he's trying to do pays off.
Yeah, well, look, I am all for if you make a decision, if you want to change something, if you want to create revolution, evolution, whatever, I'm all for committing to that and staying with it and not cutting bait too quickly because you're not giving it a chance to work. At the same time, if you have 3.5 years, 4 years, 5 years of evidence, and you're not progressing, and the results aren't there, or the style of play is going backwards rather than forward, I don't know how you continue to keep him on. I think you're right. I think they will. He signed a contract. Sunil Gulati has pushed all his chips into the middle, and he is betting on Jurgen Klinsmann. And if he goes down, he's going to go down with him.
A lot of people were hyping up Costa Rica as being the new favorite for the Gold Cup after the World Cup. And I don't think that's the case anymore because, a lot of their success was because of Pinto. Now he's gone and now Juan Chop is the new coach. Yeah. And so, a lot of people were wondering, how will the U.S. match up to a Costa Rica? How will Mexico match up to the Costa Rica? Now, I think Mexico might be the favorite currently because, their coach is doing good work, Miguel Herrera, and, they're on the up while the U.S. is experimenting. But, there's months till the Gold Cup, so we'll see what happens. I mean, at the end of the day, Jason, I'd love to have the problems the U.S. is having right now when it comes to Canada.
Sure.
I mean, I mentioned on a Canadian soccer forum, I'm like, is it too much to ask for our players to have clubs when they represent the national team? And I got attacked by Canadian fans saying, stop being unrealistic.
It's all relative. I appreciate the phone call and the perspective, Vince. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, no problem, Jason. Take care.
Let's go to Raf and Naboe Rivera from Hudson River Blue. I don't know if you want to talk NYCFC today, Raf. What's going on?
No, I was actually going to talk Klinsmann.
Okay, well, Tony. Yeah. Okay, you're yelling. Let's turn you down just a bit. You're really loud. Okay, talk a little quieter, Raf, and tell me what you think about Jurgen Klinsmann.
No, well, I don't know if you saw the ESPN story this morning. He's basically doubled down.
Oh, I saw
tripled
it.
Down.
Yeah, I saw it.
And two things come to mind.
Okay,
just right off the top of my head.
All right.
First, this is a really dumb fight for him to be picking. on this particular subject.
Wait, are you ascribing to Jurgen Klinsmann some actual sense of what's appropriate and when it's appropriate? He doesn't care, Raf.
No, I know he doesn't care. My thing is that, look, if I'm a reporter and I'm asking him, I'm like, you're not going to name names, but you want me to hold players responsible. I mean, how do I square this circle? It's ridiculous. And I just, like Alexi said, I just think, I'm not going to swear on your show. I think it's chicken crap. I also think it's indicative of just a general lack of ideas. He just really comes off sounding like this very sort of dour.
What is that phrase? A good craftsman doesn't blame his tools. I'm not saying that he doesn't have some right to say the personnel is a problem for me, and that's why I can't do what I want to do. But maybe you say this behind closed doors. And again, you are the technical director. So it's also your job to figure out a way to fix those issues. I understand you can't do that over a short timeline. It's not like Jurgen Klinsmann can make the U.S. a talented team with as much talent as a Mexico or a France or a Germany or Spain in 3 years. I'm not putting that on him. But when you get to this point and what you've done to the team is push them in a backwards direction again, rather than a forward direction. Right. And you only have so many times that you can say, well, we're trying new things, or I'm trying to get them to understand that it takes suffering. How many times is the man going to say the word suffering, by the way?
Right. And here's the thing that actually concerns me. Aside from the fitness and all that stuff, it's just the real mad and wild careening from system to system and just the indecisiveness about how he wants the team to play. Because now we're coming up to crunch time, and you have less time than what you may think you have in terms of getting the team in a roll. You can't just, people talk about, well, the losses are coming in friendlies, and so that he's experimenting, and it doesn't matter. But the thing about it is that those losses take a toll psychologically on players.
Sure, yeah.
And that's the problem, because then you come to a tournament like the World Cup, and it's really easy when you're coming off, say like a 10-game, 12-game, losing streak. It's really hard to turn it on.
Yeah.
Even if you're playing at home in front of presumably friendly crowds. Right. And I'm not entirely certain that's the case if you're playing in the Rose Bowl.
Sure. You said World Cup, you meant Gold Cup. I'm with you on that.
Gold Cup. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No.
And I could very easily see this team, stumbling through the World Cup. And then all of a sudden, the pressure then cranks up even that much further, because right after the Gold Cup comes the Copa America.
Sure.
And that's going to be, a magnitude of degree of difficulty tougher.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you've just basically lost control. So I really think that he needs to, whatever that system is, whether it's a 3-5-2, whether it's a 3-4-3, where, you possess the ball and you try to press high up the field, settle on a system.
Yeah.
And start drilling the hell out of that system.
Mm-hmm.
Put that system in, and then just stop and just go forward with that.
Again, I think what's interesting, I'm going to let you go, Raph. I got another call on the line. But I think what's interesting here is that it seems pretty obvious. And I think this was clear from the very beginning, that Jurgen Klinsmann's concern has been less about what's happening right now, except when he got to the World Cup and turned into the most practical coach on the planet. It's less about what's happening right now and more about what he's trying to create for the future. The problem is he doesn't know if he's going to succeed in that regard. So he's working with this notion of changing the culture and breaking us. This is very much like boot camp. You break them down to build them back up. Okay, but we're going through these pains while you break us down, and you're losing a fan base who doesn't have much patience to begin with. Jonathan Tannenwald, what's up, man?
I was muted, waiting my turn.
I know you were very patient. I applaud you.
A couple things. One, you sound like you were talking about your lack of infrastructure and resources over there. You sound like you're in need of a union.
A one-man union? I don't know. Can we get an American Soccer Podcasters Union going? I don't think we'd have much clout, John.
I was listening to Vince, and I appreciated his remarks. The funny thing is, we hear a lot of people talking about how the Canadian Soccer Association needs a guy with big ideas who can knock some heads together and get things done, by force of his personality. I've got a suggestion for them.
Jurgen Klinsmann?
Yeah. Well, and Vince knows that. I've had that conversation before, but I thought you might enjoy it.
But in all seriousness, John, there is something to the notion that maybe Jurgen Klinsmann is better suited for a job like Canada than he is for a job like the United States. And I'm not saying the guy is not on some level effective in certain ways. I don't think he's the best game manager. I don't think that he's the best tactician. I don't think he's the best man manager in the moment. Let's get these guys motivated. But I think he does have that note. Again, I'll point to the fact that he's been working in advance here. He's not. Bob Bradley's job was to win games, whatever that game was, whatever he was presented with whatever players he had. Jurgen Klinsmann's got a mandate that's very different.
It would be nice if every once in a while he would say, yeah, I tried that and it didn't work and I screwed up.
Would it be nice? Yeah, I think it would be nice. I'm with you on that. It would be nice.
So one other thing real quick, and then I'll get out of here. I was listening to Adam Yardy in your discussion with him on reporters' envy. There's a lot of folks in Philadelphia who like the team to be making some signings too. I've been able to keep myself busy, but I don't think Columbus is the only market where this has been a problem.
This is true. I think Philadelphia is another place where things. Well, again, I mean, in terms of sheer numbers, Columbus has outdone Philadelphia, have they not?
I would say so.
Yeah. While you're here, and since you brought it up, I know how frustrated some fans are, and we obviously have degree of involvement and interest, and the most interested fans are the most frustrated fans. But where do things stand in terms of team building for 2015? I think we've already gone over some of this, but it's worth a review here.
Well, the big question right now is going to be whether CJ Sapong is going to be the number one striker, or whether they're going to go get somebody else.
I like CJ, but he's not a number one striker, John.
Not anymore.
No,
and not the way MLS is these days. Not when you're going up against Josie Altidore and WB.
Well,
so forth.
And maybe he's a system striker or a system wide forward in a Sporting Kansas City setup. He's not a lead striker in whatever Philadelphia is going to roll out, even if it is something similar in terms of system.
They've loaned, it appears, Carlos Valdez to Nacional of Uruguay, which is I'm waiting for the official announcement on whether it's going to be a loan or a sale, but it sounds like it's going to be a loan. And Kevin Cade reported this morning that the Union are close to a deal to sign on at least a 1-year loan, maybe with an option to buy Portuguese-Canadian 6'5" center back Steven Vitória, which will boost the back line and keep Maurice Edu in the midfield, which will boost their midfield as well. So the big question now is, can they go out and find a top striker? And they've been looking for that for a long time. You could argue almost the team's entire history, and they haven't done it yet.
Yep. John Tannenwald from Philly.com chiming in on Klinsmann and the Union. Appreciate that. When I say the Union, this is going to get confusing. I may have to limit the I hate to do this. I may have to limit the Philadelphia talk during the CBA negotiations, John.
Let's hope the CBA talks aren't going on for that much longer so that we can fix this and have a season.
Trevor's suggesting we just call them the dupes for the time being. So the Philadelphia dupes working out their roster. John, thanks for the time. Have a good weekend, man. All right, there you go.
Too.
Hey, go read Jonathan Tannenwald's Games to Watch column over at Philly.com. All right, if anybody wants to jump in, I'll keep them open for one more minute. 347-756-6276. And the reason I'm doing this is because I have to at least address this tweet, and you can chime in while I'm doing so. JC on Twitter, I don't claim to get what Klinsmann is up to all the time, but I think that some fans and media are overreacting to this. Is there another coach in American soccer history who could go 9 games without a win and not face this kind of scrutiny? Is there another coach in American soccer history who could have the consistent second half failures of Jurgen Klinsmann's teams, even in friendlies? Because we overstate the importance of friendlies as a fan base. We respond to every game like it matters, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I think some of the people in the media, certainly some fans, have to pull everybody back a little bit sometimes, but I get why you're upset. You want to see progress. Is there another coach who would get the leash that Jurgen Klinsmann's getting right now? I don't think so. 631, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, it's Bill from Brooklyn. How you doing?
What's going on, Bill? What's on your mind?
Hey, it's been a long time since I called in. I got a job that keeps you from listening live, so I love to be your podcast. It's been coming up fast and frequent.
Bill, you got to quit, man. I'm sorry. That's just the bottom line. You got to quit.
Dave, if I come work for you, be the dream job. So I've been thinking. I had a ridiculous thought the other night. I wanted to share it with you.
All right.
So I was looking at the teams in the PDL, the USL PDL, and I noticed that one of them is BYU Cougars.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking to myself, well, we can all say that the NCAA, as we know it, is going to fall apart at a certain point, and that there will be a professional-esque element to it, and also college soccer is in a bit of a transitional stage. So what would happen if a big-time soccer program, college program, would say, hey, rather than try to keep doing the NCAA thing with the short season, what if we actually did what BYU did, and we actually get a team in one of these developmental leagues, either the PDL or the NPSL, or even be crazy enough to say, rather than pay scholarships, let's actually just pay players and put them in the USL Pro if they're good enough to do it.
I don't know how that would work. Obviously you can't have, if the NCAA is around, that's, colleges aren't going to do that. You're essentially, I don't know. I'd have to think about it, Bill. It's a little much for a Friday. I've actually heard it pitched before that pro teams could conceivably partner with colleges to create sort of an academy within the college system, but I don't know how that would work. And again, I think it's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of rules to follow, both in terms of the NCAA and how professional players are treated and how development works in MLS. I don't know. I think on the face of it, it sounds okay, but I'd have to know how the mechanics of it would work in order to be to give you any opinion on it.
Like I said, it was a crazy idea, so I figured that if there was any place to pitch such an idea, it would be on Soccer Morning.
And we'll put it out there, and people can respond certainly on Twitter at Soccer Morning and give us their thoughts. It is an idea. It's something to consider over the weekend. I'm giving you homework essentially over the weekend. Go think about Bill's proposal, or don't, and watch soccer and just veg out. Bill, I appreciate the call, man.
Take care, man.
Have a good weekend. There you go. That's going to do it for this week of Soccer Morning here on Backheel.com. I'm going to remind you to go to Backheel.com/store and buy one of these lovely things. I'm holding up my mug right now for you podcast listeners. It's a Soccer Morning mug. It's awesome. You should get one. Also go to 30fc.com to buy your Soccer Morning t-shirt. That directly helps the show. All of this directly helps the show. So just so you know, we're working some things out. It looks like it's going to be a good year for us, but we need your help. Soccer Morning t-shirts, Soccer Morning mugs. There's other stuff at Backheel.com that's not Soccer Morning related directly, but is very cool. So check that out. And all right, thanks to Charlie Boehm. Thanks to Adam Jardy. Thanks to all of you that called in. Thanks to all of you that tweeted. Spread the word about the show, and enjoy your soccer weekend, and I'll talk to you on Monday. Bye.